I was sitting in my car outside the restaurant, staring through the window as my fiancée Celeste laughed with her friends. She wasn't just laughing, she was pointing at her phone, clearly reacting to the text I'd sent asking where she was. It was our anniversary dinner, and she was nearly 2 hours late. This wasn't new. 3 years together, 1 year engaged, and respect had slowly become optional for her. But something about that night felt final. I walked inside. The table went quiet when they saw me. I reminded her she'd missed our anniversary dinner. She rolled her eyes and told me not to be dramatic, saying we could eat any night. One of her friends snickered and joked that I'd get over it like I always did. Celeste told me I was embarrassing her and suggested I go home. That was when I said we needed to talk, now. Outside, she crossed her arms and brushed it all off as just dinner. I told her it wasn't just dinner. It was being late, laughing about it, and treating me like an inconvenience. She called me sensitive, said I was suffocating, and claimed this was why she needed space. I told her I was done, that the relationship was over. Her attitude shifted instantly. She stepped closer and lowered her voice, telling me I'd regret it if I ever left, that no one else would put up with me, and that I'd come crawling back. I told her we'd see, then walked away. What she didn't know was that I'd already made arrangements. She lived in my apartment, but wasn't on the lease. She paid no rent, said she was saving for our future, and had slowly taken over my space and my life. I'd also accepted a new job in another state weeks earlier. That anniversary dinner was my last attempt to see if anything was worth saving. It wasn't. She came home late that night and tried to apologize like she always did. Quiet words, no change. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened, already planning a makeup dinner. I told her there wouldn't be one. She laughed it off until she realized I was serious. That's when the threats started. She told me she'd make my life hell if I tried to kick her out. I went to work, texted my brother, and told him it was time. The next morning, my brother and a couple of friends arrived with a truck. I'd already packed my essentials. We moved fast, taking only what was mine. When Celeste woke up and saw what was happening, she panicked. She tried to block the door, insisted it was her home too. I reminded her it was my apartment, my name on the lease. By the time we finished, the place looked empty and unfamiliar. I handed her an envelope with the landlord's contact information and told her the lease ended soon. I was moving out of state and starting a new job on Monday. That's when reality hit her. Over the next weeks, she spiraled. Messages went from polite to desperate to angry. She contacted my family, lied to mutual friends, and tried to use my accounts to order thousands of dollars worth of items. I locked everything down, filed reports, and warned her to stop. She didn't. She showed up at my new job unannounced, claiming to be my wife. Escorts escorted her out. That was the moment I filed for a restraining order, and got it. As her housing deadline approached, the entitlement turned to chaos. She bounced between friends, burned every bridge, and violated the restraining order by contacting me again. That earned her court-ordered consequences. Eventually, she moved back in with her parents, still telling anyone who would listen that I ruined her life. Meanwhile, my life got quieter, better. I settled into my new job, my own apartment, and a sense of peace I didn't realize I'd been missing. I started dating someone who shows up on time, respects boundaries, and doesn't treat kindness like weakness. Sometimes I think about what Celeste said, that I'd regret leaving her. She was wrong. My only regret is that I didn't leave sooner. When someone tells you that you'll regret walking away from them, that's usually not a warning, it's a confession. And listening to it changed everything.
A few months passed and life settled into something steady, almost unfamiliar in how calm it felt. The constant tension I'd lived with for years was gone. No walking on eggshells, no checking my phone with dread. Just quiet mornings, focused workdays, and evenings that actually felt like mine. That was when I realized how much noise Celeste had brought into my life, and how normal it had become to mistake chaos for passion. Word about her kept finding its way back to me, even though I never went looking for it. Mutual friends mentioned she'd burned through every couch she was offered. The pattern never changed. She'd arrived with tears and apologies, promise she'd just need a little help, then slowly take over. Food disappearing, boundaries ignored, money borrowed and never returned. Each time she played the victim when she was asked to leave. Each time people finally understood why I walked away. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding parts of myself I didn't realize I'd lost. I picked up old hobbies again. I reconnected with friends I'd slowly drifted from because Celeste always needed me more. I even laughed differently, lighter, without that edge of anxiety underneath. Respect, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't threaten you with regret. It doesn't need to prove its value by tearing you down. One night, I ran into Jade's name again. Not in a message, but in a warning. A friend told me Celeste had tried the same tactics with her, only faster and more aggressively. Jade lasted less than 2 weeks before asking her to leave. Apparently, Celeste couldn't understand why people stopped helping her when she needed it so badly. The irony was almost painful. She still believed the world owed her comfort without contribution. I didn't feel smug. I felt finished. Finished carrying someone who refused to walk, finished explaining myself to people who only listened to the loudest story in the room, finished doubting my own worth because someone else benefited from me doing so. The strangest part was how often I caught myself waiting for the regret she promised. I expected loneliness, second thoughts, some dramatic realization that I'd made a terrible mistake. None of it came. What came instead was clarity. Leaving didn't ruin my life. It returned it. If there's one thing I learned after everything finally settled, it's this. People who threaten you with regret are usually terrified of consequences. They sense the moment you stop believing their version of reality. And when you finally choose yourself, they call it abandonment, because to them, your role was never partner, it was provider. Walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the point where it finally became mine.
The last real reminder of Celeste came when I stopped expecting her shadow to follow me. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, which somehow made it more fitting. I was unpacking groceries, thinking about nothing more serious than what to cook for dinner, when I realized something simple but powerful. I felt safe in my own life. No tension, no waiting for the next argument, no bracing myself for disrespect disguised as humor. That's when it fully clicked how conditioned I'd been. For years, I thought love meant endurance, that being patient, understanding, and forgiving, no matter how often those qualities were exploited, made me a good partner. What I hadn't understood was that real love doesn't require you to disappear to keep the peace. A friend later told me Celeste still talked about me, not with remorse, but with revision. In her version of events, I was cold, controlling, and cruel. I didn't bother correcting the story. People who know you don't need convincing, and people who don't were never really listening anyway. Silence became my final boundary, and it was the strongest one I'd ever set. I started dating again slowly, carefully, not to replace what I'd lost, but to see what was possible. The difference was immediate. Conversations felt mutual. Plans were honored. Effort went both ways. There were no power plays, no threats wrapped in affection. Just two adults choosing each other without fear. For the first time, I understood that stability isn't boring, it's peaceful. Looking back, I no longer frame what happened as something that was done to me. I learned from it. Celeste didn't ruin my life. She revealed what I was willing to tolerate and what I shouldn't. Walking away wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of self-respect that took me far too long to practice. If someone reading this is sitting in their car right now, staring through a restaurant window, or lying awake wondering if they're too sensitive, hear this. Disrespect doesn't need to be constant to be real, and love doesn't threaten you with regret. It meets you with care. I was told I'd regret leaving. What I actually regret is believing that staying was strength. The moment I left was the moment I finally chose myself, and nothing about that feels like a mistake.
The final chapter didn't end with confrontation or closure. It ended quietly, exactly the way real healing usually does. One morning, I realized I hadn't thought about Celeste in days. No anger, no curiosity, no urge to check how her story turned out. Just absence. And that absence felt like freedom. Life moved forward in small, meaningful ways. I settled fully into my routines, built friendships rooted in mutual respect, and invested energy where it was returned. The people around me didn't demand proof of my loyalty or patience. They valued it naturally. I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. I stopped mistaking guilt for love. The relationship I'm in now doesn't feel like a performance. There's no scorekeeping, no threats, no emotional hostage-taking. When plans are made, they're kept. When mistakes happen, they're owned. When something hurts, it's addressed, not weaponized later. I didn't realize how exhausting survival mode had been until I no longer lived in it. Sometimes I think back to the words that were meant to trap me. You'll regret leaving. They were never a prophecy. They were fear, hers, not mine. Fear of losing control, fear of facing consequences, fear of having to stand on her own without someone cushioning every fall. Leaving didn't make me colder. It made me clearer. It taught me that self-respect isn't loud, dramatic, or cruel. Sometimes it's just saying, I'm done, and meaning it. Sometimes it's walking away without slamming doors or looking back for permission. If this story has a moral, it's a simple one. Anyone who needs you small, silent, or scared to stay is not offering love. They're offering a role. And the moment you stop playing it, they call it betrayal. I was told I'd regret leaving. Instead, I found peace.